happen on the night of August 8, 1963. A sleepy countryside in Buckinghamshire, England, was shattered by one of the boldest crimes in modern history. A gang of masked men stopped a Royal Mail train carrying millions in banknotes, executed the robbery with military precision, and vanished into the darkness with an astronomical sum equivalent to nearly £50 million today. It wasn't just a theft, it was an audacious strike at the very heart of Britain's financial system. The newspapers screamed in disbelief. The public was fascinated, even amused, by the idea of ordinary men outsmarting the system. But as the manhunt intensified and the truth emerged, the romance of the crime gave way to betrayal, violence, and shattered lives. This is the story of the Great Train Robbery of 1963, a tale of meticulous planning, astonishing execution, and a legacy that still looms over British criminal history. Britain in the early 1960s was a country in transition. The austerity of the post-war years was giving way to a new, modern era. But beneath the optimism, organized crime was flourishing. London's underworld was run by gangs and shadowy figures, burglars, safecrackers and armed robbers who had begun to target bigger, riskier scores. The Royal Mail trains, moving millions of pounds in used banknotes from regional banks to London, became an irresistible prize. These trains were considered secure but not invulnerable. The security was laughably light compared to the treasures they carried. To the criminal mind, the trains represented a golden opportunity. All it would take was the right group of men, the right plan, and the nerve to carry it out. The gang's focus fell on the Glasgow to London Royal Mail train, scheduled every night to move enormous sums of cash. On August 8, 1963, the train was unusually heavy with currency, carrying over £2.6 million in used notes, an amount being withdrawn from circulation. The train had 72 staff on board, but the real weak point was the crew and the lightly defended cash carriage. The gang knew the route, the timetable, and even the spots where the train slowed down. They decided on a stretch near Ledburn in Buckinghamshire, remote enough to operate in secrecy. Their plan was clear: stop the train, separate the engine and the high-value carriage, load the loot, and escape before authorities could react. The robbery was orchestrated by Bruce Reynolds, a charismatic criminal who dreamed of one big job to secure his future. He gathered a team of seasoned underworld figures: Gordon Goody, a slick operator and his right-hand man; Buster Edwards, the resourceful hustler; Ronnie Biggs, a small-time crook whose main contribution was recruiting the train driver replacement; and 15 others, including muscle and logistics experts. To perfect the plan, they consulted a mysterious insider known as the Ulsterman, believed to have tipped them off about the unusually large haul that night. The gang rehearsed the operation, acquiring walkie-talkies, masks, and even military-style equipment. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a military operation, carefully timed to the second. At 3 a.m., the train slowed at a signal near Ledburn, but it wasn't a real signal, it had been tampered with by the robbers. When the train came to a halt, the gang swarmed into action. The driver, Jack Mills, was attacked and knocked unconscious with an iron bar when he resisted. The gang uncoupled the engine and the high-value carriage, driving it to a pre-arranged bridge where the rest of the gang waited with vehicles. For nearly half an hour, the countryside was filled with the sound of frantic loading as bags of cash were heaved into trucks. The gang was efficient but careful, leaving behind coins and low-value bags, focusing only on the fortune in banknotes. By the time the sun began to rise, they were gone, having stolen £2.6 million in less than 30 minutes. To grasp the scale of the robbery, £2.6 million in 1963 equates to nearly £50 million today. It was the biggest robbery in British history. Each man expected a share that would set him up for life. They stashed the loot in a rented farmhouse at Leatherslade Farm, dividing and hiding the money. The newspapers hailed it as the crime of the century, and some in the public even admired the robbers for pulling off such a daring feat without firing a single gunshot. But beneath the excitement lay a fatal flaw: the gang had underestimated the relentless determination of Scotland Yard and the mistakes that would soon bring them down. At Leatherslade Farm, the gang celebrated like kings, drinking, playing Monopoly with real money, and dreaming of new lives abroad. But their victory party left behind damning evidence: fingerprints on bottles, food wrappers, and even the Monopoly board would later become critical in court. When the gang realized the police were closing in, they abandoned the farm hastily, leaving behind evidence that was practically gift-trapped for investigators. The cracks were widening, tensions rose. Some members wanted to lie low for years, others demanded their share immediately. This disunity would prove disastrous. The public was enthralled, but the police were humiliated. Scotland Yard launched one of the largest investigations in British history. Within weeks, arrests began. Charlie Wilson, Gordon Goody, and Buster Edwards were rounded up. The evidence from Leatherslade Farm proved overwhelming, but some, like Ronnie Biggs, managed to flee abroad. Biggs famously escaped to Brazil, where he became a folk legend, living in exile for decades. The trials became a national spectacle, with reporters swarming the courthouse and ordinary citizens treating the robbers like celebrities, but justice would be harsh. In 1964, 11 of the robbers were convicted and given unprecedentedly harsh sentences, 30 years each. The judge made an example of them, determined to send a message that crime on this scale would not be tolerated. But the story didn't end there. Several robbers staged daring escapes. Ronnie Biggs climbed over a prison wall in 1965 and fled abroad, eventually becoming an international fugitive for decades. Others vanished with their shares of the money, never to be seen again. The robbery became legend, not just for the crime, but for the drama that followed. The Great Train Robbery remains etched in British history as the ultimate perfect crime that was anything but perfect. Some saw the robbers as working-class folk heroes who outsmarted the establishment. Films, books, and songs immortalized their story, but the reality was less glamorous. Jack Mills, the train driver, never recovered from his injuries and died a broken man. Several gang members lived their later years in poverty, prison, or on the run. The heist became a cautionary tale. Money stolen so spectacularly proved impossible to enjoy, and yet, over 60 years later, the Great Train Robbery continues to fascinate, a reminder that sometimes the greatest crimes are not about the money stolen, but the legends they leave behind.